Today we're going to look at finding all the zeros and also how you can check your answer when you find the zeros. So it's kind of a review of yesterday with more emphasis on checking your answer. So the warm-up, how could we find the zeros of the quadratic y equals x squared plus 7x plus 10? List three ways. So this brings us back to the quadratic unit. We know it's a parabola because of the x squared as the highest power. And we studied three different ways to find the zeros. The first way we looked at was factoring using the box and circle, and then zero product property. The second way was quadratic formula, where we sang our little song and then we plugged in and that gave us the zeros. And the last way that we looked at was just using our graphing calculator. Type it in and using the graphing calculator to locate the zeros. So zeros, again, are where our parabola crossed the x-axis. Our learning targets today. How can you find all the zeros of a higher degree polynomial? And then how can you check or verify your answer? So here are the steps to finding all the zeros. You can use your graphing calculator to graph the polynomial and find at least one zero. With that zero, use synthetic division to divide your polynomial down to a quadratic. Because if it's a quadratic, again, we can use one of these three methods to find the rest of the zeros. And just a note here, a polynomial of degree n will have n roots, and this includes repeated and imaginary roots. So what does that mean? If it's degree 2, it will have 2 roots. It might be, they might be imaginary, they might be repeated, but a parabola will have 2 roots. If it's x to the third, it will have 3 roots, and so on. So let's look at the first example. Find all the zeros of p of x equals x to the fifth minus 6x to the fourth plus 20x to the third minus 60x squared plus 99x minus 54. So the first question you should ask yourself is, how many zeros am I looking for? And we're looking for 5 of them because this is to the 5th power. So again, if we look at our steps here, the first step was use your graphing calculator to graph it and find 1 0. So let's go ahead and do that with our graphing calculator. Let me pull mine up. And we'll type it in. So open a new graph page. And it's x to the 5th minus 6x to the 4th plus 20x to the 3rd minus 60x squared plus 99x minus 54. All right, so we're looking for 5 zeros. We need to locate at least one of the zeros. All right, so let's look at this first zero. It looks like 1. We better double check. So if we go to Menu, Analyze Graph, let's find one of those zeros. Yep, so one of the zeros is 1. Let's start with that one. Okay, so if one of the zeros is 1, we do this. Now use synthetic division to divide your polynomial down to a quadratic. Okay, so if the 0 is 1, we put the 0 here, and then we're going to have our coefficients, 1, negative 6, 20, negative 60, 99, negative 54. We're going to use this to divide this down to a quadratic. So this is x to the 5th. We have to use synthetic division. 2 times to get down to a quadratic. Let's try this. All right, first step for synthetic division, carry down, multiply, and then add together. Okay, so carry this down, multiply, and add together. Let's multiply and add together. I believe this is negative 45. I better double check. All right, so negative 45. Multiply, add together, 99 minus 45 is 54. All right. All right, so what we've done is we've divided this down, but we went from x to the 5th to x to the 4th. So now we need to use one of our other zeros to divide this down again, because again, we need a quadratic. So let's go back to our graph and let's find another 0. So again, it looks like 2, but just to double check, Menu, Analyze Graph, let's find a 0. All right, it is in fact 2. So let's use 2 and divide this down again. So first step, carry down the 1 and multiply, add together, multiply, add together, multiply, add together, and multiply and add together. Okay, so 2 was a 0, so now this went from x to the 4th to x to the 3rd. This would be 1x to the 3rd minus 3x squared plus 9x minus 27. All right, let's use that last 0 then. Menu, analyze graph, 0. And again, it looks like 3, and it is. Okay, so 3 is the 0 we're testing. Okay, first step, bring down 1. Multiply and add, multiply and add, multiply and add. All right, so this is down now to a quadratic. This is x squared. This would be a 0x plus 9 equals 0. And now we can use quadratic formula to solve this. We could find a, b, and c and plug in. But if it's just an x squared with no x, there's another way to solve. We can subtract 9 from each side. We'll get x squared equals negative 9. Take the square root. X equals, and if I pull out that I, it's plus or minus 3i. So here are the other two zeros. So here are the 5. Remember, we were looking for 5 zeros. 1, 2, 3, and plus or minus 3i. So there are 5 zeros there. Again, with this last step, you would use quadratic formula if you had an x term, but since we don't, we can subtract 9 from each side and take the square root. All right, let's check our answer by plugging it into the original equation and showing that it equals 0. Okay, so let's just pick one of them. I just want to pick one to check. Let's just do 1. How about? Or no, let's do 2. All right, so we're going to pick 2 and we're going to plug it in, and I'm going to erase this work right here. I'm going to say clear. Okay, so let's plug in a 2 and make sure that we get a 0. So we have 2 to the 5th minus 6 times 2 to the 4th plus 20 times 2 to the 3rd minus 60 times 2 squared plus 99 times 2 minus 54. So when you plug in, use parentheses around what you plug in. It's especially important to do that if you have a negative 0. And if I go to Scratchpad, I'm just going to type that whole thing in. So it was 2 to the 5th minus 6 times 2 to the 4th plus 20. Oops, I don't want that in my exponent. Times 2 to the 3rd minus 60 times 2 squared, oops, plus 99 times 2, and minus 54. All right, so here's how you check your 0. You plug it in, and you should get 0 for an answer, and you do. So when I say verify or check your answers, you plug them into the original equation and make sure you get 0. All right, let's look for this one. Consider this function. How many zeros should it have? Well, it's to the 4th power. It should have 4 zeros. Let's find all the zeros. Let's start by putting in our graphing calculator. So if I go back to my graph page, and I can hit tab and go up, or I can just open a new graph page. But I'm just going to delete this one and type in what we have. X to the 4th plus 3x squared, or 3x cubed, sorry, minus 11x squared minus 3x plus 10. All right, so let's graph this, and so let me move these here. All right, it has 2 of the zeros, 1, 2, and then there's this 0 here, so let's go to Menu, Analyze Graph, and find the other 0. All right, so we have 3 zeros, and we're looking for 4. So let's use synthetic division. I'm going to start with I'll just start over here and go to the left. So let's start at 2. So if 2 is my first 0, I'm going to write the coefficients 1, 3, negative 11, negative 3, and 10. First step, pull down the first number. We're going to multiply and add. Multiply and add. Multiply. So 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. And we're going to add, negative 5. And we're going to multiply and add. Okay, so this went from x to the 4th down to the x to the 3rd. And if it's x to the 3rd, I still need it to be x squared, so I'm going to divide by another 0. So the other 0 was 1. If we go back to our calculator, we could also do the negative 5. It doesn't matter what order you do them in. All right, so pull down the 1, multiply and add. Multiply and add. Multiply and add. So here's our quadratic, x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0. But we have another 0, so why don't we just keep going? We could use quadratic formula to find the other two zeros. Actually, no, let's use the box and circle. This one's not too hard with box and circle. Okay, so you could factor it down again, but I'm going to use box and circle, or you could use quadratic formula. We want, if we put in the box and circle, two numbers that multiply to 5x squared, that add to 6x, and that would be 5x and 6x. And so if we get the outside, this would be x plus 5, x minus 6 equals 0. And so x plus 5 equals 0. One of the zeros is negative 5. And if we have x minus 6 equals 0, the other 0 is 6. So here are the four zeros, negative 5, 6, 2, and 1. And I guess we could have just looked in our calculator. Okay. Oh, and we had a 0 here as well. Let me think. So the other 0, I suppose we could have used analyze the graph. Okay, it's negative 1. Did I calculate something wrong here? What multiplies to 5? Oh yeah, I did something wrong. I'm sorry. So let's go back, because we can see that the other 0 is negative 1. Okay, so back to the box and circle. I was wrong with my factors here. Okay, so again, we were looking for two numbers that multiplied to 5 that added to 6, and that would be 5x and 1x. There we go. So you have x plus 5, x plus 1. And if those are the factors, the zeros are the opposite. So this one will give us negative 5, and this one will give us negative 1. So our four zeros are negative 1, negative 5, 2, and 1. And this one, unlike the other one which had imaginary roots, this one we can see them all from the graph. So we could have just done them right all from the graph. Okay, let's try another one. Oh, write the polynomial in factored form. Remember, the factors are the opposite of the zero. So if one of the zeros was 2, the factor would be minus 2. One of the factors was 1, so it would be x minus 1. One of the factors was negative 1, so it will be x plus 1. And the last factor will be x plus 5. So here's the polynomial in factored form. Write all the different factors. All right, so like I alluded to before, you can find all the roots with your graphing calculator. Use your Desmos calculator app at home if you need to find the zeros. But this one, I'll just type it in here. So if you hit tab, and again, you can open a new calculator page or just delete the equation that you had. All right, so this will be x to the 3rd. This should have three zeros. X to the 3rd plus 5x squared minus 15x. And then minus 25. All right, we're looking for three zeros, and they're all here. So 2.95, negative 1.27. Oops, menu, analyze graph. Let's find this other guy. Negative 6.68. So there are the three zeros that you can find just from your graphing calculator, which is the fastest method. Okay, and then the last one. Find all the zeros when factor has been given, and then check your answers. This should have three zeros. We have one of them. So let's use synthetic division. Or we could use our graphing calculator, but we'll try with synthetic division. 1, 9, 23, 15. Pull down the first number. We have a 5. 5 times 5 is 25. 25 plus 9 is 36. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. The factor is positive 5. That means the zero is negative 5. Okay, so we need to redo this. And I pulled down the wrong number anyway. So redo. So 1 is what we pulled down. Multiply. This will be a negative 5, so this should be a 4. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20. So this will be a 3. Negative 5 times 3 is negative 15, so this is a 0. All right, to find the other zeros, we've gotten this down to a quadratic. This is x squared plus 4x plus 3. You could use quadratic formula. This one looks not bad for a box and circle, so that's what I'll use. We want two numbers that multiply to 3x squared that add to 4x, and that would be, so multiply to 3, add to 4, 1x and 3x. So x times x is x squared, x plus 1 is 1x, x plus 3 is 3x. So if these are the factors, the zeros would be negative 1, negative 3, and we had the first one which was at negative 5. So here are the three zeros. To verify our answers, we plug in. So let's try negative 1. I'm just going to type it into the calculator. Use parentheses again, especially with negatives. So parentheses, we'll have negative 1 to the third power plus 9. Times negative 1 in parentheses squared plus 23 times x, so plus 23 times negative 1, and then plus 15. Okay, and we get 0. And you could check the other 0 as well by plugging in. So verifying your answers is plugging in. If you have a 0, use synthetic division until you get down to a quadratic, and then you can use box and circle or quadratic formula to find the other zeros. So your assignment will be similar to this. Let me know if you have any questions in class.